Great news. If you're using formal methods as your static analysis strategy, then you're never going to have false negatives. That's mathematically guaranteed. But what about false positive? Well, I will argue it depends what you mean by false positive. Sure, the quality of the implementation matters. For example, in the previous video, I gave you that picture where I showed you for abstract interpretation, that is part of formal methods, that you're basically doing an approximation for what the reality is. And then obviously, if you refine that approximation to be closer to the reality, then you're going to reduce the number of false positives. And it's quite possible to lower significantly the number of false positives this way. But what about this situation where a user says, the tool tells me that this combination of values is possible in my program, but I know better. It's never going to happen. Well, that's maybe because the user knows something that the tool doesn't, namely that the range of value that you're going to pass inside the function, for example, is not going to be the full type. Now, how do you deal with this? Well, there are two ways, right? You can say either A, this is going to be reused later on and maybe that people won't know any better and then they are going to pass full range, or maybe that this is going to go inside the library and thus it needs to be ultra robust, or B, that code is always going to be used in that context. If that is the latter, if it's never going to be reused elsewhere, it is quite possible to actually adjust the type of values that are going to be considered by formal methods. So for example, in our tool, you would be, for example, returning not the full range from a stub, for example. You might choose to return something that is a little bit shorter. This way, your analysis is going to gain precision, but beware, because if at some point in time in the future, your assumptions are changing, well, the diagnostics are not going to be correct. So with great power comes great responsibilities. It is quite possible to restrict ranges and thus reduce the number of so-called false positives. You just need to make sure that the assumptions that you're making hold.